All right, let's just jump right in. What if our most common, everyday ideas about God are, well, completely off the mark? Today we're going to explore a really fascinating and, honestly, pretty radical alternative called process theology. And we're going to use the classic text by John Cobb Jr. and David Ray Griffin to guide us.
I mean, think about it for a second. What's the image of God you grew up with? For a lot of us, it's this powerful, kind of distant figure, right? A king on a throne, all-knowing, unchanging, with everything already figured out. Process theology looks at that picture and asks a really bold question. What if that's not it at all? What if that whole image is just wrong?
See, to really get what process theology is about, you can't just, slap a new coat of paint on old ideas. It argues we have to go way deeper, right down to the foundations of reality itself. Because here's the key. In this way of thinking, your idea of God and your idea of the universe are completely tied together. You can't change one without changing the other.
So before we can start building this new framework, we first have to do some demolition. We've got to clear the slate. The authors are really clear on this. To make any headway, we have to start by intentionally rejecting some of those very common, traditional ideas about God.
And they're not talking about minor tweaks. The book lays out 5 specific traditional concepts of God that process thought says we just have to leave behind. It's a total teardown.
Okay, so what are they? Well, first, there's the cosmic moralist, like a judge in the sky. Then the unchanging absolute, a God totally unaffected by anything that happens here. It also rejects God as a controlling power, a puppet master pulling all the strings. And it denies God as a sanctioner of the status quo, someone who just keeps things as they are, or as a purely male archetype. According to process thought, all 5 of these ideas, they've got to go.
Let's just dig into one of those for a second. The unchanging absolute. This idea comes from a classical concept called impassibility. The thinking went like this. To be perfect, God has to be completely unaffected by, well, anything. But think about what that means. It means God can't actually feel our joy or share in our suffering. Process thinkers look at that and say, whoa, wait a minute. That creates a cold, distant God, and that just doesn't work.
And then there's the controlling power idea. The book makes a great point here. If you believe God controls every single detail, you get backed into a really tough corner. When something terrible happens, like a loved one dies way too young, you're forced to ask, why? Why did God let this happen? Or worse, why did God make this happen? Process theology steps in and says, hey, maybe that's the wrong question entirely because you're starting with the wrong idea about how God's power actually works.
And this leads to a really stark, blunt conclusion right from the text. The God that's defined by these 5 ideas, the unchanging, all-controlling, cosmic judge, that God, according to process thinkers, simply does not exist. Boom, the slate is now officially clear.
Okay, so we've turned down the old house. What do we build in its place? Well, interestingly, we don't start with God. We start with reality itself. The philosophical engine driving all this, process philosophy, makes a huge shift in perspective. It asks, what if the universe isn't made of static things at all, but is actually a constant flow of dynamic moments or events?
This is the absolute core difference right here. On one hand, you have the traditional view. The world is made of separate, solid things. The book uses the analogy of billiard balls. They exist on their own and they just bounce off each other. But on the other hand, you have the process view. Here, reality is much more like a flowing river. The most fundamental building blocks aren't static objects. They're these momentary events that are always in a state of becoming something new.
So what exactly are these events? The technical term for them is actual occasions. You can almost think of them as the atoms of reality. But, and this is a huge but, they aren't tiny bits of matter. They are tiny, momentary drops of experience. And in this view, everything, from a stone to a plant to your own thoughts, is made up of these tiny moments of experience. And the person we have to thank for this whole framework is the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. He's the mind that came up with this foundational idea of actual occasions, or occasions of experience, as the true building blocks of everything.
Okay, you might be thinking, if the whole universe is just a constant fizz of these tiny, momentary drops of experience, what stops it all from just dissolving into random chaos? Great question. And the answer is the second massive idea in process thought. Absolutely everything is connected.
See, in this model, nothing just pops into existence out of nowhere. Every single new actual occasion, every present moment that happens is literally built out of all the moments that came before it. The past isn't just gone. It's woven into the fabric of the present, actively shaping what's happening right now.
Whitehead, of course, had a special word for this: apprehension. Now, it sounds a little technical, I know, but you can basically think of it as a kind of feeling. Each new moment, each new occasion, apprehends or feels the entire history of the universe that came before it. And it pulls all of that into its own new, unique moment of existence. It literally absorbs the past to become the present.
And this just completely turns our normal idea of cause and effect on its head, doesn't it? We're not those isolated billiard balls bouncing around anymore. We are part of a deeply interconnected web where the relationships between things are actually more fundamental than the things themselves. The book points out this makes the whole worldview thoroughly ecological, and it even lines up with ancient wisdom, like the Apostle Paul saying, "We are members of one another."
All right, so now that we have this picture of a flowing, creative, deeply relational universe, we can finally bring God back into the picture. So what kind of God fits in a universe like this? Well, one thing's for sure. It can't be that static, controlling king on a throne that we threw out at the beginning.
The God of process theology isn't about coercive power. It's not a God with a hammer forcing things to happen. Instead, God's power is persuasive. Think of it as the power of a gentle, guiding hand, not the iron fist of a divine dictator who's forcing the universe down some pre-written path.
So what does that actually look like? Well, here's the idea. In every single moment, for every single actual occasion that pops into existence, God offers it the ideal possibility for what it could become, the absolute best path forward. This is called the initial aim. God doesn't force any occasion to take that path, but lovingly lures it, invites the world toward greater creativity, more beauty, and what Whitehead simply called enjoyment. God, in this view, is the ultimate source of all newness and all potential.
And that brings everything right back to us, doesn't it? If reality isn't some fixed stage with a script that's already been written, if it's a genuinely open, creative, unfolding process, and if God isn't a dictator but a creative partner in that process, then what we do, what we choose, what we create, it actually, truly matters. It becomes a real part of the ongoing, unfolding story of the entire universe. So the final question that process theology leaves us with is a big one. What will you contribute to the flow?